Hi Stampers, I'm Kristy from KristyCoromandel.com and welcome to Getting Started with Card Making series. We're up to episode 4, but before we get into this week's episode, let's have a recap of last week. Last week we talked about ink. We talked about all the different types of inks that are out there in the market, from watercoloring ink, what ink to use when you're colouring with alcohol markers, what ink to use when you're heat embossing, and also what sort of ink do I use when I just want to stamp an image. And then of course I finished off with a challenge for you to gather some ink for yourself to add to your crafting toolbox. This week we're going to be talking about the basic stamping technique, and believe it or not, it is not as easy as everyone thinks it is. Yep, I just ink and stamp. Well, that is the pretty basics of the steps that are taken in obviously stamping your first image. However, I find when I teach classes and workshops and the first timers, it's just not as simple as they thought it was. So I'm going to show you today exactly how we stamp our first image. How do we get that nice crisp image every single time on our project? How do I avoid the smudging? How do I get nice crisp clean images? So let's get started, shall we? So one of the things when selecting your stamp sets, you will notice in your catalogue that it has suggested clear blocks. So for example, in this one here, Follow Your Art, which is a stamp set that I'm going to demonstrate with today, it says B, D, and G. So when you get your clear blocks, you'll notice that there's like an engraved, I don't know if you can see that there, but this says G on it. And then this one here is a D block. And then the other one we wanted was a B. Let's see. And here's a B block, okay? So these are the 3 sizes that they recommend for this stamp set. So in the catalogue, all your images are at 100%. So I can lay over my block and I can go, oh, I can fit that on there. I can fit that one on there. Oh, this one can fit on here. Okay, so you can see, well, that will fit. That one will fit there. Okay, so you can see what your stamp sets will fit onto which block. So it's very important that you use the correct size block on your stamped image. Now, what happens if you don't have the correct size block? Well, let me just share with you. So I've got my little block here. So let's grab this little image, this little button image right here. Gently peel that off. It's been a while since I used it. Now let's say I was to stamp this using a block that's pretty much oversized. Okay, so I'm going to ink this up. Okay, now first thing you can see is that I've got ink all around my block. So this can potentially, when I'm stamping this down, I've got ink in places that I don't want. I've also got ink all around the outside of my red rubber, which has made this image right here. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. I've got now this little extra mark right around there that I don't necessarily want. So how do we get away with that? How can I avoid that? So as you can see, selecting the right size block is pretty important. Okay, so let's get another stamp. So I've got this image right here, and I'm just going to go with my blocks. Okay, what happens if I've got a block that is too small for my image? Okay, so let's take this one for example. It's just slightly hanging over. So what happens if I didn't even ink? Okay, and now I go to stamp this down. Okay, so now what's happened is I've missed this bit here because it's hanging off the edge. I haven't been able to apply the pressure that I need to get a clean image. So obviously we do need the correct size block. Okay, so let's try and stamp this again. This time, let's find the right size block. Here we go. And let's stamp it again. Okay, and this time I've got full coverage on all of those lined images. Okay, so some other tips to look for when we're stamping with our stamps here. So I've got another image here that I have mounted to my block. Now you don't have to have them, like for example, this one here didn't quite fit going this way. It's got a bit of an overhang happening, as you can see. And it didn't quite fit going this way. Still got this little bit of overhang. Okay, so I've put this on my block on an angle, and that's okay. Okay, so as long as I got it all covered in and it's all on nice, I'm going to be able to stamp a nice clean image. Now, when you get your ink set, your ink pad, you don't want to be pushing all the way down on there, okay? If you were to do that, I'm going to get ink all around the outside here, and even on my block if it's on the wrong size. Let me just zoom in so you can see that. Okay, because I think the lighting's a bit off. Okay, I've got ink all around the sides. Now I can simply just get a baby wipe and I can wipe all the way around there. Okay, but if I'm just a little bit careful, I can avoid getting that on there. Instead, what I want to do is I want to gently tap my ink pad. Okay, gently tap it. And I can turn it over and see that I've got nice ink coverage. Now, if you feel that you're going to be heavy-handed by tapping, you can simply hold your ink pad up and tap like this, okay? Making sure you get nice coverage. Now, if it's a large stamp, like a background stamp, you might want to lay your stamp upside down, get your ink pad and gently tap it all around it till it's nicely inked. Now, if you do happen to get any ink on the outside of your image, you can simply just grab a baby wipe and wipe that off, okay? Like here, I've got a little bit over here, so I'll just wipe that off. All nicely done, okay? And then when I go to stamp on my paper, my cardstock, I'm going to stamp in an up-down motion. I'm not going to come in on the side and stamp down. I'm not going to rock it. I'm going to simply go up, down, apply pressure, no rocking, just apply pressure. And if it's a solid stamp, you may need to apply a bit of pressure in the middle here, especially if it's a big stamp set as well. And then I can lift up, okay? You don't want to lift on the side, you want to lift straight up, okay? And there you can see a nicely perfect image. And this particular image has some fine lines in it too. So by doing a simple tap, 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 and going up and down, I'm able to get those fine lines with no smudging whatsoever. Okay, so what happens now with your stamping with a photopolymer stamp set? So our photopolymer are our clear stamps, where our cling mount were our red rubber stamps that you can see here. So the difference in, like I shared with you in episode 2, is that our cling stamps have this layer of foam here that help to apply pressure when we stamp, okay? Whereas our photopolymer don't have that. And especially our solid images, like these ones here, we've got our solid images. They're going to take a little bit more to help make sure we get all of that coverage. So once again, we want to pick the right size block so I can lay my stamp, regardless whether it's rubber or our photopolymer. I lay it onto my work surface and I get my block and I lay it on top and then I apply pressure and then now it's stuck to my block. Okay, now with photopolymer, because we don't have that rubber or that cushioning inside, that foam, I'm going to use a foam mat here. And Stampin' Up! Have this is called their piecing stamping mat. So you can use this for paper piecing as well as for stamping with your photopolymer stamps. Okay, I do recommend that you have a different one for paper piecing, as you're going to get holes in it, and have one that's purely for stamping with your photopolymer stamps. So I'm going to put my cardstock on top of that. And we're going to ink this up. So once again, I'm applying pressure. So I can see that I've got good ink coverage. I can turn it over. I can see I've got ink all over my stamp there. I've got some on my block here, so I'm simply going to get my baby wipe and wipe all of that excess ink that I don't want off. Okay. And then I'm simply going to stamp. I'm going to apply pressure and just add a little bit of pressure in all through that stamp, just so I can get that solid image out, okay? Then I can lift off my paper and you can see that I have my perfect solid image now. Now, what if I didn't do all of that? Well, let's have a look. Okay, we're going to stamp this on normal thing now. Okay, I've got a bit of a patchy down here and a bit patchy over here, okay? So definitely having a piercing mat or a stamping mat will help with you getting good even pressure with your solid stamps, especially for photopolymer stamps as well, okay? Now, what if I had a fine line stamp? So here's a fine line one right here. Just going to add this to a block. And let me get some ink. Oh, wrong color ink. Let's try that again. Get some ink and let's ink this one up. Once again, we tap, tap, tap. Now, if I push too hard, I'm going to get some smudging. I don't know if you can see that. You get some smudging and some bleeding. But if I push lightly, same pressure as I would have pushed with my solid image, I got those nice crisp lines. So you can see the difference here. I've got smudging happening on this end over here, and this I've got some nice crisp clean lines. So what if I didn't stamp that on a piercing mat? Okay, that still worked quite nicely, but obviously for my solid I definitely need to have a stamping mat for. Okay, so let's recap what we've just learned today. So one of the things when I'm stamping, I need to make sure that I have the correct size block that matches my stamp image. When I ink up, I need to make sure that I tap, tap gently. I turn my stamp over to make sure I've got nice coverage all over my image and wipe away any excess ink that doesn't belong. Then when I stamp straight up and down, apply even pressure, no rocking the stamp, okay? This will avoid smudging and also getting ink in unwanted places. And then I simply just pull straight up. I don't pull off on an angle, just straight up, and I get a nice clean image every single time. And also, if I am stamping using a photopolymer stamp, it is best to use a stamping mat. And then I can simply ink up my stamp the same way I would my rubber stamp. Make sure I've got even coverage. Straight down, apply pressure, extra pressure, especially if it's a large stamp or a solid stamp. We want extra pressure to make sure we got all that color. Then I can gently lift up and I've got an even spread as well. Once again, with my fine tip, I'd make sure I don't push too hard. Okay, so I get those nice clean lines every single time. So there you have it. There is the basic stamping technique. Ideas on how to stamp with your rubber stamps, as well as some tips and tricks for you for stamping with your photopolymer stamps. So your challenge this week is to practice stamping. So grab a scrap piece of cardstock or even some photocopier paper and ink up your stamp set and stamp all of those images, okay? Get used to how it feels, making sure you have the right image on the right size block and adjust that if needs to be. Now next week we are going to talk about cardstock. There are different types of card out there. There's from thin to thick to pattern paper to vellum, watercolor paper. When do I use this and what weight of cardstock should I be using for each project? So that's what we're going to discuss in our next episode. Until then, my name is Kristy Coromandel and thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in our next episode. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for some more fun tips on getting started with card making.